Thanks for tuning in to another episode of the Urban Scope podcast. This is the Inside the Scope edition. I'm taking a deep dive into the recent trend of HBCU coaches. There has been a recent surge of NFL greats and NFL players that have taken roles at these HBCUs, which is a very good thing, and is bringing, or hopefully it's a next step into bringing the HBCUs back into prominence. So just to give a little history, uh, this hasn't been a new precedent, right? So Deshaun Jackson just took a job at Delaware State University, HBCU on the East Coast, Northeast to be exact. Michael Vick took a job a couple of weeks ago as a head coach of Norfolk State University, another HBCU that's on the East Coast as well. But we cannot forget Eddie George, who is at Tennessee State University, my alma mater in the land of Big Blue. Ed Reed took a job with Bethune-Cookman for about 25 days. Unfortunately, that situation kind of went sour. So it didn't turn out as planned, but he did take that job initially. Doug Williams, who was the first black quarterback who played for the Washington team back in the 80s and early 90s, I believe. He was the first first black quarterback to win a Super Bowl. So he took a job at Grambling State. And of course, Deion Sanders' contributions to HBCUs is probably the biggest, or it is the biggest amongst all of these players that took these roles at HBCUs. Now, I bet you're wondering, what is a HBCU? So HBCU is a historically black college or university. There are 107 of these HBCUs throughout the U.S. And like I said, these schools are generally underfunded. They don't have a lot of resources as other schools because, like I said, compared to the PWIs, which is the predominantly white institutions, they have more resources and more NIL money, which I'll get into, which is the name, image, and likeness thing that's become very popular amongst student athletes right now. So it's a disadvantage right now for HBCUs trying to get these players and trying to get more eyeballs on their games and more attention to their schools because, like I said, they lack the resources, they lack the funding, they lack the facilities that most of these other schools have. Compared to just to go on the worst end of the spectrum, probably Alabama has so many resources and so many facilities. The workout rooms, the practice facilities, things like that. The stadiums that they play in are massive. You can compare them to NFL facilities. The HBCUs, unfortunately, we didn't have those resources. But it's exciting to see the new trend of NFL players come in and try to resurrect these HBCUs, specifically football programs. Now, I want to see, in the future, I want to see more people contribute to the basketball programs, baseball programs that they have, and things like that, so we can bring HBCUs back to the forefront. Now, the NBA has done a good job of highlighting these HBCUs, supporting the HBCUs, and so forth. But if you look into the market of players, it's a very small percentage of those players come from HBCUs. I remember Robert Covington from Tennessee State. He went to HBCU, and I think it's might been one or two other players sprinkled out through the league that were actually a part of that came from HBCUs. But it's just historic trends that they're setting by taking these jobs and bringing eyeballs and bringing more revenue to these schools, and it'll help these schools not only in an athletic sense but from a general standpoint. More people will want to go to these schools and be a part of the heritage of these HBCUs. So I know for me, going to Tennessee State, I wouldn't have traded it for the world. If they say you can go to Ohio State, you can go to Miami, I still would have chose TSU because, like I said, Tennessee State gave me opportunity and it gave me a good education as well. And I got to learn the heritage of the school and be able to assimilate with my own people. So I'm always thankful for Tennessee State for that. But just to give some more history on HBCUs. Prior to integration, um, HBCUs were the only schools that minorities could go to, black schools, um, that blacks could go to. You had these 107 universities. I'm not sure if it's 107 back then, but it was only these 107 universities that you can attend. So them the only places you could play sports. It was only until I want to say 1970 when USC played Alabama. And shout out to $40 million slaves. You have to check this book out. It kind of goes into the details about the history of the HBCUs and how we lost our power um, in HBCUs to these PWIs athletically. And enrollment wise, because when you lose the athletics, you kind of lose enrollment as well. But $40 million slaves, they talked about how these HBCUs had all the talent because that's the only school the black players could go to. So it wasn't until 1970 when USC played Alabama, where USC ran Alabama off the field. I want to say the score was 42-21. So the change was the famous Hall of Fame coach Paul Bear Bryant. He saw these black players with all this talent on the USC teams, and he said, "Man, how can I'm going to start recruiting black players too." So he started doing it, and other players started doing it. So all these PWI schools started getting these black players just so they can, get the talent on their teams because they were inferior talent wise to these HBCUs. So that kind of set the trend for kind of the deterioration of these HBCUs. Well, not athletically. Well, yeah, athletically, they deteriorated. So the things about the HBCUs, about these new coaches taking these HBCU roles that I'm pretty sure they're very well aware of. Um, the biggest thing I would say is, like I said, they will have lack of resources. They won't have a lot of NIL money to pay players and to lure players to the school. They won't have the boosters. Some of these schools, like a University of Texas, they got the oil money boosters. These oil tycoons that's worth billions and hundreds of millions of dollars. You won't really have that in HBCUs as much. Now, Tennessee State, we do have Oprah Winfrey as an alumni. She was a billionaire, but she's not rich as some of those tycoons in Texas. And I think it was a little discrepancy with Tennessee State and her. So it's been kind of rocky for the last couple of decades. So, but nevertheless, these resources that they're behind the eight ball as far as trying to recruit players. They can only recruit players basically on their name and what they've done in the NFL and throughout their careers. Now, there is a reverse side to this. So, similar to a Deion Sanders going to Jackson State, you will get more TV time, TV games, whether it be on ESPN2 or some of these smaller networks. But you will get more TV time. You will get more publicity. You will get more revenue eventually from as a result of these things. But that's off your name itself. Deion Sanders was in a very good situation as far as having a son that was a top quarterback, having a son that was a defensive player that was very good. And he was able to flip Travis Hunter, who was a 5-star recruit that was going to his alma mater in Florida State. He was able to flip him from Florida State to Jackson State. So, but like I said, that's rare. But Travis Hunter and Deion Sanders have a unique relationship where Travis Hunter trusts Deion Sanders and trusts his process. And he knows he was one of the greatest cornerbacks of all time. Some consider him the greatest defensive player of all time, next to like a Lawrence Taylor or something like that. But you're going to have to get players that trust you and trust your process and that trust you with their careers because, like I said, Travis Hunter took a big risk going to Jackson State before eventually going to Colorado with Deion Sanders. But coming from Jackson State, he wasn't going to be nominated for the Heisman. He wasn't going to be – he was probably still been a top draft pick. Shout out to Dominic Rogers-Cromartie from Tennessee State University. I think he was a first round 16th pick when I was in school. So, and he came, like I said, he came from Tennessee State at HBCU, and he was still being able to get drafted high and succeed at the next level. But he worked with Deion Sanders as well. He had a very fast 40 time. I think he ran a 4.29. somewhere along those likes. But at HBCU, you have to stand out way above these PWI schools, the players, because they get all this TV time. There's more film. There's more recruits and scouts at the game. So they have that advantage in their favor. But like I said, you only need one player to start the trend at your school. Whether you're a Deshaun Jackson at Delaware State, you're Eddie George at Tennessee State, you're Michael Vick at Norfolk State. You just need one player, a 5-star, preferably. But if you can get a 4-star, you can change some things. But it's going to take that Travis Hunter like bravery for somebody to come through and make those trends. Like I said, it's monkey see, monkey do. Most of the time, most people say, "Oh, I just want to go to PWI. They have all this money. I'll get paid all this money. I'll have all this attention. I have the women. I have the, I'll pretty much have the world at my feet, and then I can make the playoffs and make my name that way for the 3 years I have to stay in school at least." But Travis Hunter, he was interested in just playing football. All of the glitz and glamour really didn't get him, so he, was able to go to Jackson State for a couple of years and eventually make that transfer to Colorado, where he eventually or ultimately won the Heisman Trophy. So I'm excited about the HBCU love that's been going around. Like I said, we HBCUs don't get a lot of attention, but Deion Sanders recently, he also flipped Julian Lewis, who was a 5-star recruit going to USC. Now is going to be at Colorado next year. Huge news, huge move, huge transaction for the portal. Like I said, the portal has been a gift and a curse for some people because they lose players, but Deion Sanders has made the most of it and able to get these players over to him. Like I said, he's losing Shador Sanders next year, his son, to the NFL, but he will restock the cupboard, and he's restocked other places as well on the defensive side of the ball and offensive side of the ball. So it's going to be very exciting times to see what he can do with this roster and if he can extend forward. Like I said, he almost made the playoffs this year. See if he can make the playoffs next year. He has a bowl game tonight, which I will be tuned in for Travis Hunter and Shador's last game, Shiloh as well. But I'm just overwhelmed by the HBCU love, and hopefully this trend will go forward. So thank you for tuning in. And then until next time, I'll see you next time.